Hey, greetings, leaders. Steve Schleter with Never Ending Referrals. Hey, here again to help you build your agents into those trusted advisors that we need to be for the consumer today in our market that's confusing, right? There's all this national media that maybe doesn't reflect what's happening local in your market, and then yet my goal here with Market Stats and MOFIRS is to help you equip your agents with some of the trends that we know are true in most of all of our markets, and you can help the consumer make better decisions about how to move forward. So in our last segment, by the way, the playlist to these videos and a few previous videos is linked below, so you can go to the playlist and go pick that up. In our last one, we talked about why we wouldn't see likely sub 5% interest rates again, maybe for a decade. And we talked about wage growth, and we talked about our employment situation in this country. Today, we're going to talk about inflation in the context of the consumer and what's happening with the consumer that is also now another pressure to keep interest rates elevated. And I'm going to pull up my screen real quick, and let's go through a couple of things real quick to kind of just shed some perspective on the world we're living in today. And I want to share with you this graph, U.S. live birth rates. And I want you to just look at two things. The baby boomer, which that generation was 1946 to 1964. And you'll notice that was a huge generation. And then we had a gap, the Gen X gap, where we had a massive decline in birth rates. And that was 65 to 1980. Now, I want you to think about this. 1980, advance that 45 years or so. So that would be kind of in 2025. So this group that was a smaller generation is kind of our current period that are in their what we would call their peak spending years. And then the millennials, of course, then we had a huge spike up in population growth with the millennials, a rather large population. Not quite as large as the boomers, but a big population segment, if you will. So now with that in mind, I'm going to share with you another item from our consulting guide that we're using with our clients that sheds light on this a little deeper. So let me go here. And as we look here and we deal with this conversation regarding inflation, the last video we addressed interest rates and wages. Here we're going to address the consumer. Now let's go back to that population segment we looked at before. This is a little work that's done by economist Harry Dent, and he talked about when does the consumer spend the most money, and it's in their family formation years and in their maturing family years, which that would generally be 46 to 50, 52. This would be in the mid 30s, early 40s, mid 40s would be the family formation years. And this is when spending is peaked. Well, if we come and we look below, now remember that last graphic we looked at was birth rates. And this graph is birth rates lagged by 48 years, meaning being lagged for their peak spending period. So you'll notice right now we're here in this trough. And the reason we're in that trough is because that Gen X generation was smaller. And you're going, why did interest rates stay so low for so long? Well, you notice that the boomer generation was coming out of their peak spending years. If the boomers' peak spending years would have been 1992 to 2008, and then you had the Gen Xers, which was a smaller generation, less pressure on inflation. We had a good consumer. We just didn't have crazy consumption because we didn't have as many people in their peak spending years. Now, where we're at, we're about to go into this place in time where the millennials are going to be a spending force. They are really starting to come into the family formation years. In a few years, they're going to come into the peak spending years. And that combined with wage growth, that combined with not enough people to fill jobs, and a strong consumer means a lot of pressure on inflation, which means lots of pressure on interest rates. So there's my bunch of dinging in the background. My schedule is telling me the next thing's coming up, but here you go. And so the quick fact is the millennial generation is entering their peak spending years, and it's going to be a powerful economic force. They're going to spend money. You keep hearing it in the headlines. You know, the consumer, the consumer, the consumer. 75 to 80% of our economy is consumption. And as long as the consumer is strong, we're going to have these inflation pressures. And, you know, I was at an economic summit recently where an economist said the Fed's target of 2% inflation is probably not realistic considering factors like this. When you've got such a strong consumer, you've got such a strong future consumer, and you have employment gaps that we have, a 2% inflation factor is probably not realistic. And yet, to keep it under control, interest rates are probably going to stay elevated. So what's the message and what's the MOFIR? I go back to the last one. I think the message is the same. Hey, find out why we may not see sub 5% interest rates, for another decade. This may be the best time to buy a home. So that would be a message. The MOFIR would be, if you have any plans to buy or sell real estate in the next 24 months, please call to schedule a no obligation strategy session. Now, why the next 12 to 24 months? Because if they have any plans, this could be the best window of opportunity right now. Because if your market is like many, and there are available inventory, they have choices. If there's available inventory and you have choices, you have better ability to negotiate, maybe an interest rate buy down, a 3-2-1 buy down, a permanent buy down. You know, if we're about 6.5 today, you know, you could put a message out there. Did you know that you could still get a 5% interest rate? Ask me how. Call today to schedule a no obligation strategy session if you have any plans to buy a home in the next 12 to 24 months. This may be the ideal window of opportunity right now. So there you go. And by the way, working to be the trusted advisor is an important part of what we do today as real estate agents. If we can help your agents further, we've got a program called Never Ending Referrals that we can bring into your market center. It's a market center facilitated 6-week program that helps them really master the hard and soft skills of really being that trusted advisor and adding value to the database. We can take the 201 plus challenge and really help them get the most out of that thing called their database and turn it into a data bank. Take care, folks.